Good evening, everybody, and a very warm welcome to this evening's event on behalf of Finchley Progressive Synagogue. Particular welcome to those of you who are non-members who are joining us as guests. We're very pleased to have you with us this evening. I should say before we start that tonight's event was very much the brainchild and has been put together by Stanley Volk, and I'll be handing over to him for a few words in a moment. But first of all, I'd just like to quickly run through the programme for the evening. We're going to start with an academic's view of the Battle of Cable Street. That'll be followed by our centrepiece, which is a live play reading of a Jewish family caught up in the events of the 4th of October 1936. After that, we'll have a short slideshow showing some of the locations and personalities relating to the day's events. And then we'll conclude with some remarkable newsreel footage of the battle itself. But first of all, Stanley, what led you to the idea of putting together tonight's event?
Well, thank you, Adrian, for that question. And I suppose the short answer is that I do enjoy a project, the research, the problems to overcome, and the enjoyment of watching the end result. Sometimes. I did actually do a brief presentation about 3 years ago on the same subject at the U3A that I attend, which I do a lot of history classes there. And this was just the film that I'd cobbled together from mostly YouTube with a presentation with a friend about the Battle of Cable Street. And this really mooted the idea of doing something at FPS with more things added to it, like the play. And I'm very grateful to the cast for their hard work, and I think remarkable achievement in such a short space of time. And also the idea of Zoom theatre is very, very new, and it's very interesting, and I think it can work. I did grow up in the East End in the late 40s, 50s and early 60s, so I know the area well. But of course, it's not the same East End that my parents grew up in, and this was a rich, vibrant time to be Jewish in that area. And that's why they all turned out in such great numbers. I mean, they were literally being threatened by Mosley. Relationship today, yes, there was the rise of right-wing nationalism all over Europe and even in America, of course. So that has a bearing of it. And probably I wanted to get away from endless discussion of COVID. So I hope you, thank you all for coming, and have a good evening.
The great thing about the Battle of Cable Street is that the people of the East End, those other people, came together and did something which perhaps we can't really understand, which was to act together to defeat somebody politically. Context for this was that Oswald Mosley formed a party called the British Union of Fascists in 1932. By 1936 he was having a hard time. He wasn't doing as well as he thought he was going to do. He decided that one way of breaking through electorally was to galvanise anti-foreign sentiment, anti-Jewish sentiment, anything against the other. And the place to do that was the East End of London, which was brought everybody together. The East End of London was always the melting pot of British society, and he could specifically target the Jewish population of the East End of London. We can do this. Look, we are going to take on the foreigner in British society. What happened? It brought people together. It brought very diverse communities together. It brought them together as people who opposed fascist violence. And so the Communist Party in London, the District Committee in London, came under incredible pressure from the Stepney Party. The Stepney Party said, look, we need to do this in principle, but we also need to do this pragmatically, because if you don't do it, somebody else will, because people want to do this. It took ages. Right up until the Friday before the Sunday, the Communist Party was still committed to that demonstration in Trafalgar Square. It was only under the most intense local pressure and finally dawning on them that this would be a total disaster if they ignored it, that they changed their position. Within 48 hours, they were able to put together a huge organisation which was then able to take on the events in this area of London. Was a willingness to challenge not just something you disliked, but the authority of the state. Quality and quantity. Now what happened was that this worked. Over 3 or 4 hours, the police tried to break down, they tried to break through the lines, they arrested people, they beat people with batons, the people who were beaten were replaced, and in the end, it looked as though it was impossible to get through. Instead of trying to get into the East End, they marched away along the embankment. And so, in practical terms, the day was a victory. But the important thing to remember is what happened later, and I think some of the most important people involved in this made this point, particularly a guy called Joe Jacobs, who was the secretary of the Stepney District Party of the Communist Party, later expelled for his street activism by the party, and he made the following point, is that what made it possible to win this one-day victory, not a total victory, was the unity of different sections of the working class. And that was one of the great phenomenon of East End Jewish life from the 1890s through the 1930s. So when Mosley and his fascists would say the Jews are communists, many Jews in East London would say, damn right, we're communists, we're radicals, we want to change the world. And that had a powerful influence. There were 60,000 Jewish people in the small borough of Stepney, and that was well over 50% of the population. But they had a disproportionate influence not only on the immediate area, but throughout the whole of the East End, where they galvanised the politics of the Irish workers in the Docklands, and they also had a big impact on the whole of the London Communist Party. Huge, radical moment in which people who'd left the pogroms and the ghettos of the 1890s in Russia and Latvia and Poland arrived in a society which they thought was going to make them, but they had to remake themselves. That's a good thing. And they had to take on the British establishment. They had to take on an anti-Semitic British establishment. Mosley was a member of that establishment, and he thought it was entirely uncontentious to be anti-Semitic. But when he came to the East End, he found not only a Jewish working class willing to oppose him, but he found a political environment in which deciding people's worth on the basis of their ethnicity or their religion was not acceptable.
Mrs. Khan, it's Monty. Mother sent you some strudel. Okay? Hello, Harry. How you going? All fight and fit for the demo?
Yeah, I'm fit. Like a Trojan, I'm fit.
You won't see him at any demo. In the pictures, you'll find him.
The pictures? I'll be bloody mad, you won't hear a thing. Have you seen the streets today, Sarah? Have you seen the streets? They're mobbed. Mobbed. The lads have been there since 7 this morning.
But Dave, there's so much work to do here already.
I know all about the work here, but there are plenty of party members to do it. Hello, Sarah. Spain is the battlefront. Spain is a real issue at last.
Spain, Dave.
Spain?
Yeah. Dave is doing an international brigade. He's leaving for Spain tomorrow morning. But Spain is only one issue to be brought to a head. You're too young, really.
Dave, don't go mad all of a sudden. It's not all glory, you know.
Harry, you look as though you didn't sleep last night.
He didn't, the old Cossack. But you know what Cossacks are. Am I right, Harry?
Yeah. I saw your sister Sissy in Aldgate, Harry. She was waving your mother's walking stick in the air.
She's mad.
Hey, where's this cup of tea, Sarah?
Here's your tea. Do your fly buttons up, Monty, you old tramp, you. Now then, Dave, tell me what's happening and what the plans are.
Well, it's like this. The party loudspeaker vans have been out all morning. You heard them? The fascists are gathering at Royal Mint Street near the bridge. And they plan to march up to Aldgate, down Commercial Road to Salmon Lane in Limehouse. You know Salmon Lane, where they think they're going to hold a meeting. Then they plan to go on to Victoria Park and hold another meeting.
2 meetings? What do they want to hold 2 meetings for?
Why shouldn't they hold 2 meetings?
What, you think they should hold 2 meetings?
No, it's not what I think. You're such a funny woman. It's not what I think, but they want to hold 2 meetings. And what's so strange about that?
But it costs so much money.
So perhaps you want that we should have a collection for them.
Now, they could go along the highway by the docks and then up Cable Street, but Mosley won't take the highway because that's the back way, though the police will suggest he does.
I bet the police caused trouble.
They had to call in forces from outside London.
You won't make it a real fight, boys, will you? I mean, you won't get hurt.
Hey, Sarah, you remember they threw a 7-year-old girl through a glass window? So don't fight the bastards.
Now, Monty, there's to be discipline, remember? There's to be no attack or bottle throwing. It's a test. You know that, don't you? It's a test for us. We're to stop them passing. That's all.
I sure will stop them passing. I see a black shirt come by, I tap him on the shoulder and I say, "Excuse me, you can't come this way, we're digging up the road." And he'll look at my hammer and sickle and he'll doff his cap and he'll say, "I beg your pardon, comrade, I'll take the underground."
Comrades, you want to know what the plans are or you don't want to know? Again, as we don't know what's going to happen, we've done this. Some of the workers are rallying at Royal Mint Street, so if the fascists want to go through the highway, they'll have to fight for it. But we guess they'll want to stick to the main route so as not to lose face. You follow? We've therefore called the main rally at Gardener's Corner. If, on the other hand, they do attempt to pass up Cable Street,
Everything happens in Cable Street.
What else happened in Cable Street?
Peter the Painter had a fight with Churchill there, didn't he?
You're taking a Sydney Street, sweetheart.
Well, you know, she gets everything mixed up.
You're very wonderful, I suppose. Yes, you're the clever one.
But I suppose at least I don't get my facts mixed up. Anyways.
Listen to him, my politician.
Hey, Sarah, do me a favour. Leave the fists till later.
hey, if on the other hand they do try to come up Cable Street, then they'll meet some dockers and more barricades. And if any get through that lot, then they still can't hold their meetings, either in Salmon Lane or Victoria Park Square.
Why not?
Because since 7 this morning, there's been some of our comrades standing there with our platforms.
Bloody wonderful, innit? Makes you feel really proud, eh, Sarah? Every section of the working class area that we've approached have responded. The dockers at Limehouse have come out to a man. The lot.
Yeah, the unions, the co-op, the Labour Party members, and the Jewish People's Council.
The Board of Deputies.
There she goes again. Not the Jewish Board of Deputies. They asked the Jewish population to keep away. No, it's the Jewish People's Council. They're the ones that organised that mass demo against Hitler some years back.
Yeah. Been nothing like it since the general strike.
Christ, the general strike. Now that was a time, Sarah. Eh?
What are you asking me for? You want I should remember that you were missing for 6 days when Ada was ill.
Yeah, I was missing. I'm sure.
Well, sure you were missing.
Well, where was I missing?
How should I know where you were missing? If I'd have known where you were missing, you wouldn't have been missing.
They're assembling. They're assembling. Out to the barricades. The fascists are assembling. Hey, Stan, where's the best place? Take your boy to Cable Street. The fascists are assembling. Come out of your houses. Come out of your houses.
Hey, what about us, Dave?
You haven't suggested to Harry and me where to go yet.
There's plenty of time. They won't try to march till 2 and it's only 12:30.
You eaten? You boys had lunch.
We all had lunch at my place, Sarah. Sit down, stop moving for a few seconds.
Take your pick, Sarah. If you fancy yourself as a nurse, then go to Aldgate. We've got a first aid post there near Whitechapel Library.
Such organisation. And you lot?
Well, Monty is taking some of the lads to the left flank of Cable Street, and Prince is organising a team of cyclist messengers between the main points and headquarters. I'm going round the streets at the last minute to call everyone out. And that's the lot.
All we have to do is wait.
Yeah, where's Ada?
Ada and Ronnie are at Jaime's place. I thought it best they get right out the way.
You think she'll stay away? Your precocious daughter is a born fighter, Sarah.
Yeah, of course she is. She'll be round the streets organising the pioneers, you'll see.
Never. I told her to stay there and she'll stay there.
I'm sure.
God forbid she should be like you and run wild.
All right. So she should be like you then.
I'm jolly sure she should be like me. Ronnie isn't enough for him. A boy of 5 running about at nights, swearing at his aunts. Bless him. Didn't half upset them. They wouldn't let him mess around with the radio, so he started effing and blinding and threw their books on the floor. Like you, he throws things.
What? Have you ever come across a woman like her before?
Sarah, I'd love another cup of tea, please.
I'm going to make it. I'll make it.
Thank you.
He's so sweet when anybody else is around. I'll make some sandwiches.
Oh, we've eaten, Sarah.
Eat. Always eat. You don't know what time you'll be back.
They shall not pass. They shall not pass. They shall not pass.
The boys, listen, do you hear them? You know, Sarah, that's the same cry the people of Madrid were shouting.
Yeah, and they didn't get past neither. Imagine it. All those women and children coming out into the streets and making barricades with their beds and their chairs.
Yeah, it was a slaughter.
It was. And then came the First International Brigade.
Yep, the Edgar Andre from Germany, and the Commune de Paris from France, and the Dombrowski from Poland.
Yeah.
Wait till our Dave gets over there. You'll give him brass balls for breakfast, eh, Dave?
You really going, Dave? Does Ada know?
Don't tell her, Sarah. You know how dramatic calf love is.
Calf love, if you get back alive from Spain, she'll marry you at the landing stage. You mark me.
How you going?
Well, they tell me it's a weekend trip to Paris and then a midnight ramble over the Pyrenees, the back way.
It's terrible out there. They say we've lost a lot of good comrades already.
Yeah, we lost too many good comrades out there. Do you hear me, Dave?
Sammy Avner, Lorimer Bircher Bordilla, Felicity Brown, and Ernest Julius at Aragon.
Julius, the tailor, used to work with us at Cantor's, but he was only a young boy.
Yeah, and Felicia, an artist, and Lorimer, an Oxford undergraduate.
And Caulfield was killed at Cordova.
And Ronnie Symes at Madrid.
And Stevie Yates at Castel de Campo.
Casa del Campo, Madrid. Such beautiful names. And all that killing.
Hey, You know who organised the first British group? Nat Cohen. I used to go to school with him. Him and Sam Masters were on a cycling trip in France. As soon as they heard of the revolt, they cycled over to Barcelona and started the Tom Man Centuria.
He's a real madman, that Nat Cohen. He talks slogans right outside the police station. And I used to work with him.
God knows if they'll come back alive.
Yep, when 3 fascist deserters were asked how they reached our lines, they said they came through the ills of the widows, orphans and sweethearts. They'd lost so many men attacking those ills.
Yeah, and may they lose many more.
The war in Spain is not a game of cards, Monty. You don't pay in pennies when you lose. May they lose many more. What kind of talk is that? Sometimes, Monty, I think you only enjoy the battle and that one day you'll forget the ideal. You ate too much. You can't have brotherhood when you ate. There's only one difference between them and us. We know what we're fighting for. It's almost an unfair battle.
Unfair, he says. When Germany and Italy supplying them with guns and tanks and aeroplanes, and our boys have got rifles and mortars. Is that unfair? You call that unfair? I don't think.
Look, when you fight men who are blind, it's always unfair. You think I'm going to enjoy shooting a man because he calls himself a fascist? I feel so sick at the thought of firing a rifle that I think I'll board that boat with a blindfold over my eyes. Sometimes I think that's the only way to do things. I'm not even sure that I want to go. Only I know if I don't, then well, what sense can a man make of his life?
You're really a pacifist, aren't you, Dave?
Yeah, I'm a terribly sad pacifist, Sarah.
You know, I understand you, Dave, and I know what you mean, boy, but what do you want we should say? If you go, then we're proud of you. And if you stay behind, we love you. Sometimes you live in a way you don't know why. You just do a thing. So you don't have to shout because you're shouting at yourself. But a pacifist, Dave, there's going to be a big war soon. A fascist war. You think it's time for pacifism?
He's right, Dave.
I know it's not time yet. I know that. I know there is still some fighting to be done. But it'll come. It will come, you know, when there'll be a sort of long pause and people will just be frightened of each other and still think they have to fight. That will be the time. But now, well, I feel like an old gardener who knows he won't live through to the spring to plant his seeds.
Man your posts. Men and women of the East End, come out of your houses. The black shirts are marching. Come out, come out.
Christ. They've started before time.
Yeah, it might be a false alarm.
Well, look, we can't take the risk. Let's get going.
Yeah, I'll clean this and bring it back later.
But I've made you tea.
Stick it back in the pot. We'll drink it later. Now, you two, you know where the posts are. Cable Street, Royal Mint Street and Gardener's Corner.
Okay.
Okay.
Go, the street is mobbed. Jesus, look at them all. Everyone's coming out. Everybody.
Where's the first aid post?
Whitechapel Library. Harry, you coming?
Yeah, I'm coming. You go on. Good God. There's Alf Bosky and his wife. She's got the baby with her. Hey, Alf. Good luck, comrade. We're coming. Sarah, there's Alf Bosky and his wife.
I heard. Now, are you coming, Harry? I'm going to Gardener's. Come on, we'll be late.
Don't hit anybody with that thing, blooming, Sarah. It blooming hurts.
You're a fool. Now do something useful for once in your life and bring that flag.
Okay, all right, I'm coming. Wait for me. Sarah,
They shall not pass.
wait for
They
me.
shall not
Wait
pass.
for me.
They shall not pass. They shall
They
not
shall
pass.
not pass.
They shall not pass. They shall
They
not
shall
pass.
not
They
pass.
shall not
They
pass.
shall not pass.
Unnecessary.
They shall not pass.
No,
They shall not pass.
They shall not pass.
very thought of you, my love. I'd like to start with a map of the East End of London. You can see three main stars of the events of the day. The uppermost one is the junction of Whitechapel and Commercial Road, and this was called Gardener's Corner. There was a store called Gardener's. And coming south, you can see Royal Mint Street, where Mosley assembled his troops. And then opposite there, you had the Cable Street itself. You can see the Star, which is a long street which stretched all the way along, which is the edge of the Wapping area where the dockers used to live, mostly Irish dockers. And everything north of that, between there and Commercial Road, in fact, where my parents lived, and in the middle, where near Sydney Street, where I used to live, and that's where you, for about half a mile, you'd reach the borders of Bethnal Green, which was not a Jewish area. It seemed clear that Mosley's intention was to march from Royal Mint Street, probably down Lemon Street, to get to Gardener's Corner, and either to march down Commercial Road or preferably down Whitechapel, because that's the really heart of the Jewish East End of London. But because of the crowds gathered at Gardener's Corner, the police advised him to go down Cable Street. And again, the crowds were holding fast at Cable Street with not one but three barricades. Now here you have several pictures of the area. There's a plaque to Sir Jack Cohen, the founder of Tesco stores, who certainly lived in this area. There's a picture of the famous Petticoat Lane, where no doubt Mr. Cohen sold his groceries. There's a picture on the lower right of the Whitechapel Library, where many famous intellectuals would study. One such person who definitely did study there was the upper right, Isaac Rosenberg, poet and painter, and served in the First World War and sadly died on the last day of the First World War. Moving on, the lower left is a picture from Boris Studios, which is in Whitechapel, where it seemed to me that all the houses I've ever been to, whose parents or grandparents had a wedding picture, particularly wedding pictures, in this studio. What had impressed me, I don't know these people, but what impressed me was the sophistication of their demeanour, and also of the clothing that they wore. With a very, very high standard. Here you have another picture of Petticoat Lane. Top right, you have a picture of the so-called sweatshops. But these chaps seem quite healthy, well, very confident, quite well fed, quite happy, in fact, to be working. Lower left, you have Gardener's Corner, a little bit earlier picture. And if you can read the text, overcrowding, the Great Depression impacted the cabinet manufacturing and the tailoring trade, which are the two trades most Jews were employed in. And it does say also, in spite of harsh conditions, Tapney had a vibrant and distinctive cultural identity based around synagogue schools, Yiddish theatres, cinemas, politics, Zionism, cafes, not necessarily in that order. To the left, there's the pamphlet published by the Jewish People's Council to the Home Secretary to try and ban the march, which was unsuccessful. And to the right, there's the ticket that actually allowed you in to Trafalgar Square on the 4th of October to support the people of Spain against fascism, which was mentioned in the play. They never had time to print further pamphlets, so they in fact stamped over it, as you can see at the top, alteration, assembly at Aldgate at 2 p.m. This is a picture of Joe Jacobs, the local Communist Party secretary of Stepney, who favoured confrontation, and to my mind, the hero of the day. He argued for confrontation against Mosley, but was turned down by the Central Office, who favoured going to Trafalgar Square to support the people of Spain against Franco, and said, we'll come back in the evening and we'll march through the East End after Mosley has finished, which said, well, look, you know, we'll lose all credibility in Stepney if we do that. But as you can read, the Communist Party eventually, 2 days before, changed their minds. And I think due to we have Sir Edward Mosley, who was one of the youngest ever Conservative MPs, 1922, but later on, across the floor of the House to the Labour Party, became Chancellor of the Duchess of Lancaster. He formed the British Union of Fascist Party in 1931, had a very good turnout in the national elections at that time. He had the support of Lord Rothermere, who was the press baron of the day, whose publications include the Daily Mail, but lost the support, particularly in the 1932-34 Olympia rallies, that when his stewards became extremely violent towards any hecklers. The left-hand side poster shows his intention to form 4 marches, 4 great meetings. They were to be held in Shoreditch, Limehouse, Bow and Bethnal Green, and these were all surrounding areas of the East End of London. These are pictures of Mosley taking the salute, not sure, possibly on the day, on previous occasions, and on the bottom left-hand side is a picture of Mosley in 1932 with Mussolini of Italy, who, as I understand it, gave him financial support after he lost the support of Lord Windermere. These are pictured women included. As you can see, it took at least 10 men to arrest one person, which was good because it drew the police away from the crowd, and that young man is featured in the film. Next slide, please. And there's near the end now. There's people running down Cable Street. There's on the right-hand side, the police trying to make a gap to let Mosley's car through to Cable Street. The bottom right-hand side, you've got one of the barricades. There was 3 barricades, and on the left, Sir Philip Game, who was the Metropolitan Commissioner of Police, who finally said, "It's enough. Stop the march. Stop the march. Go south. Go back. Go to Embankment and continue your march there. Forget about the East End." Thank you. And the last picture now is, as you can see, this is Gardener's Corner. The headlines of the Daily Worker, they did not pass. And the good thing that came out of it was in 1937, the public prosecution banned the wearing of political uniforms in public, which was the 1936 Public Order Act. Thank you.
But from the mid-30s onwards, there was a new and sinister political movement which attempted to use the crowd as an instrument of power. Oswald Mosley and his British Union of Fascists believed that fervent nationalism and strict military discipline were needed to pull Britain out of the Depression.
Sooner or later, in the lives of great nations, comes the moment of decision, comes the moment of destiny. And this nation again and again in the great hours of its fate has swept aside convention, has swept aside the little men of talk and of delay, and has decided to follow men and movements who say we go forward to action. Let who dare follow us in this hour. That is the permanent, the mighty mood of Britain.
Mosley's party had created a quasi-military wing of around 15,000 black shirts. They attracted strong support from a broad spectrum of society, including the middle and upper classes. The flag-waving marches of the fascists provoked a battle for the streets with one of their main enemies, the Communist Party. Support for the communists was growing in strength in areas of high unemployment, while loyalties to established political parties were breaking down. Confrontations between crowds of fascists and communists were not confined to the capital. There were in fact regular clashes in cities all over Britain.
Hitler and the German movement now have the opportunity to emulate.
The fascist tactics of provocative but orderly marches frequently led the police to see Mosley's opponents as the instigators of the riots that followed. The large Jewish community in London's East End became a principal target for the Black Shirts' anti-Semitism. As part of their campaign of terror, the fascists planned a march through the Jewish East End on October 4th, 1936. They were faced with a community determined to defend itself. This confrontation culminated in the notorious Battle of Cable Street, one of the few British riots that have been well documented.
The fascists were drawn up in Royal Mint Street, and they were to be reviewed by Sir Oswald Mosley. And that's where they lined up, and that's where they were reviewed, but as far as they went, they never got any further. But as I continued towards Gardener's Corner, there were thousands, it was so thickly, it was very difficult to get through. But around about the early afternoon, the police started to try to clear space for them to march.
The lack of sophistication in police tactics was vividly demonstrated both by their excessive violence and by a little-known incident of abject surrender. In an atmosphere of growing police panic, beleaguered officers made token arrests.
As a policeman, he was just going to hit a woman on top of the head and I punched him on the chin. I was then arrested and about 12 or 14 police took me to Lemon Street Police Station.